Welcome everyone to another 3D Total interview. Today we have the amazing and phenomenal Devin Elle Kurtz here with us today. If you're not familiar with Devin, she's an illustrator, visual development artist, and background painter working in the entertainment industry. She has worked on so many popular titles like Disenchantment, and she's also published her own art book with 3D Total, as well as worked as an illustrator on other projects and other art books. Devin is a phenomenal artist, and I, for one, found her work on YouTube through her Inktober process videos, which I absolutely enjoyed watching. So thank you so much, Devin, for taking time out of your busy schedule to have this interview with us. So yeah, thank you so much. Okay, so let's just get to know you a bit more. I know I just introduced you to the camera, but I want you to personally introduce yourself to the audience. So here you go.
Of course. Well, I'm Devin Elle Kurtz. I am 26 years old. I've been working in the entertainment industry kind of generally since I was about 18, so been a while now. I've worked in games, animation, but do a lot of book stuff. I illustrated a picture book called Mother of Sharks that's coming out later this year. I do book covers, yeah, all kinds of stuff. And then my own independent stuff too. I like to sell my art at conventions, and I have an online shop that I open occasionally. I know not all that often, but I do sometimes. Yeah, that's about it.
You've been working since 18. That's really impressive. Can you tell us a bit more about like your artistic journey all the way to then? Like, please share with us.
Well, it is probably important to say that I actually started freelancing like well before 18. Like I was freelancing on like game projects through high school, for better or worse. I honestly, like, I'm not gonna make any recommendations there. But it is what it is. So I had, somewhat of a client base going into adulthood or whatever. And then I was really lucky to be able to get my first full-time animation position when I was 20 on Disenchantment, which I stayed on until the beginning of 2021. So I was on that show full-time for quite a while, and then I pretty much built up, all the other stuff kind of around that. Man, yeah, I think, I always had a real interest in animation. I was so inspired by animation as a kid. I think a lot of us probably were, just watching those incredible movies by like Disney and DreamWorks and Studio Ghibli and watching anime. I, really wanted to be a part of that. So I was really driven to like figure out how I could, play some role in making that magic happen on screen.
No, definitely. Yeah, I, for one, I grew up watching a lot of Disney movies, so I really understand that drive, and like just watching it happening, like how did they do this? I want to do that. I want to get my hands into that. Like I totally understand. You said you worked on Disenchantment. I actually already knew that, but like just you worked on Disenchantment, and you were, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, you were a lead background painter, right?
Yeah, well, I started as a regular background painter when I was 20, and then for the second like batch of ordered episodes, it's a little weird the way that Netflix does it. So that's like technically part 3, I think, because they release them in like uh different time frames than when they're done. But like on the second batch of episodes that we did, I became lead because it just made sense to have a lead at that point. And that was really fun. It was a really interesting challenge. I made some of my like best friends in the animation industry that I've ever had working on that show. Just like such an incredible group of people, just like amazing people, not only artistically but also just as people. Like I feel really lucky to have known them and to have been able to like enter the industry surrounded by so many awesome people.
No, that sounds absolutely great. It must have been an amazing experience. I absolutely love the show Disenchant. Like I love it so much that I work on my bullet journal, and like each month in my bullet journal I kind of have like themes. So it was in 2020, I believe. I was trying to think of a theme for March. I believe it's March. But I couldn't get the scene of the steampunk city out of my head. And I was like, I just really want to do something steampunky because of that scene. It's an amazing scene. I really love that show. I wanted to ask more about your like. I mean, it was an amazing experience, but I want to know more about the artist side of things. Like, how is being a background painter? How is that? Like, how's the process like? How does it look like? Because some people don't know how this actually works. Like background painter, what exactly is that? Can you tell us a bit more about being a background painter?
Totally. Yeah. Why don't I use those like steampunk land backgrounds like as an
Definitely,
example?
yeah.
I'll take you through like the life cycle of one of those backgrounds, like how we go from like conception on it to like what you see on screen. So like starting at the very beginning, the writers obviously have to figure out, what's going to be in it, and then they write the script. So then we have the script. Then the storyboard artists have to figure out how to take that script and turn it into storyboards for what we see on screen, right? And usually, well, not usually, sometimes alongside the storyboards being done, the background designers who work in black and white or grayscale, they're doing the black and white design work, and the layouts. Uh, they will sometimes, alongside the storyboard artists, be looking at what locations are in the script for an upcoming episode and doing designs, initial designs. It kind of depends on how busy the production is. Some productions are so busy that you kind of just jump right into layouts and don't have time for design work, because like technically design work would be stuff that is not like a final background, and then layouts are like the line work for the final background that you see on screen. Sometimes the design is being done as the layouts are being done, but ideally they're not. Ideally you have some time to design ahead of time. But then once the storyboards are finished, the designers, the layout artists will do final layout drawings of the storyboard. Based on the storyboard panels, they'll see, where are the characters going to be on screen. They'll take that really rough indication that the storyboard artists have laid in, and then also the descriptions of, what the writers have written, and they will draw final layouts of the backgrounds. So like, in the Steamland area, those steampunk cities, there's a whole team of designers, background designers, who are doing the incredible layout drawings for those shots. And then once and also important to note, those layout drawings are sometimes black and white line drawings, but then on other productions, on some shows, they'll be like grayscale shape fill-ins instead. So there's like different ways that layout and design can be done. And then, so what I do is I'm a background painter. So we would get handed those final black and white line drawings by the design team, and we would have to color and paint them. And on Disenchantment, we actually further broke down the process even more, where we had a team that was mostly focused on doing color design and filling in like kind of like base colors for locations, and then a second team that was doing like painting and rendering. By the time we got there, those lines were blending a lot more. Like a lot of the artists who had initially been doing color keys were doing final paintings, and vice versa. But there were often multiple people touching every single background, even just within like the color and painting department. Like on Steamland, I know that when we got handed those backgrounds, me and my friend and coworker Rachel, we sat down together and like spread them all out on the floor and had to figure out, all right, what is this going to look like paint wise? And we like together were kind of going through and figuring out, all right, like what kind of colors would look good here? What sort of effects? Like, we want it to be really steamy, because it's steampunk, right? Figuring all that stuff out. It's such a team effort. Like every single shot that you see on screen has been touched by so many artists. And I think that's really beautiful, well, not even just artists, but also writers and then directors have given their input, art directors, like then the storyboard artist, creates the composition, and then the designer, fleshes that out and creates these beautiful drawings, and then colorists and painters come in and, give it color and dimension and depth. And then even after us, then it's handed to the camera department, who are adding all the final effects, like, like a smoke, drifting up and like a layer of fog over stuff. There's effects artists, and then the camera department's doing final rendering. Like everything is touched by so many different artists, and I think that's so cool. Like that's something about the animation industry that I just think is like so beautiful, that it's such a collaborative effort.
Yeah, it is, and there's so much going into like just one scene, and just it feels like a whole lot coming together to become this one special piece, right? I think that's awesome. I can see at the in your background, like all the books. Beautiful, love it. I am a bookworm as well, so I really love that so much. Your collection is absolutely stunning. Recently, you featured in 3D Total's recent title, the Artist Master Series on composition. And I cannot wait to have my hands on that book. I'm sure it's an amazing book. But can you tell us a bit more about your collaboration in that book?
Totally. Yeah. Composition and narrative is one of my favorite topics. I think maybe my favorite topic. I love color and light too, and I made a small contribution to the Color and Light Master Series that came before. That is an
Yes, you
incredible book
did. You
too.
did actually.
It's a
Yeah.
gorgeous book. But I think like for me especially, like storytelling through art, storytelling through illustration is such a passion for me. And I think this is partly because I came from animation, where like every single thing that we're doing in animation is for story, like for narrative. It's for the purpose of serving the narrative and pushing the story forward, telling the story that is being told. I like feel like I've really kind of brought that into my illustration work too, where a lot of what I like to do in my illustration work is tell a story through illustration, especially tell an entire story in one illustration. And that is it's a complicated skill set to develop, and it's one that it took me a really long time to get comfortable with because I wanted to do it so badly when I was young. I thought it was so incredible. I'd look at what my favorite artists were doing. They were able to tell these stories in a single illustration, like tell a whole narrative. You'd be able to look at one illustration and understand, what are the characters doing? What is the story? What's happening here? I thought that was so impressive, and I also thought that it was some like innate ability that they were born with that I just didn't have because I was trying, but I was trying without like building to it. You know what I mean? I was trying without all of these other base skills that I needed to be working on to slowly to slowly build up to a place where I would be able to tell those stories the way that I wanted to. So I was really excited with this book to have a chance to break down my process in a lot of detail and figure out, how I could impart, all of those different moving pieces that need to come together to tell one story in a single illustration. Like I really focused on like taking people through my process of figuring out first like what story do I want to tell in this piece, and then figuring out what are all of the different steps that I need to take to figure out how to tell that story. What are the characters that need to be there, what actions do they need to be taking, how can I lead, and then most importantly even how can I accurately lead the viewer's eye through the piece to see all those different elements in the order that I want them to, so that I can impart through visuals alone the story that I'm trying to tell. And I feel like I like writing that chapter. I really feel like I got to delve into that subject so deeply, and I think it is the best explanation of that subject that I've ever written before, which I'm really like proud of and happy about.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all that. Like it was really, I really do like, I love hearing about the process behind the artwork and not just the final piece. And that's one of the reasons why I collect art books. I love looking at how things came to be and learning from every artist and finding out how they, you know, create their artworks. And I have your art book. I loved the way you broke down your process, and even on Instagram, just the way you're always sharing so much information. But for those who maybe aren't familiar, can you share a bit about your process?
Totally. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, if anyone is interested in seeing my process in great detail, I have a bunch of stories saved in my Instagram story highlights where I break down my process. And I would say that like for the majority of my work, for like the scenes that I do, I have a pretty regimented process which helps me avoid getting anxious, like I guess would be the best way to say it. Like it helps me like know that I have a plan that I'm going to follow through, so that at no point in the piece, hopefully, do I feel like so lost and overwhelmed that I want to quit, right? Especially cuz doing like really big complex scenes, like that's a big issue. Is sometimes it just feels like there's so much to do, it's so overwhelming, like I don't know what to do next. There's so far that I need to go to get from point A to point B, right? So what I try to do is First, I'll start with like a thumbnail sketch, something really simple that just like shows the full piece in its most simplest form, and then I will usually do a more detailed sketch, maybe two or three, to kind of figure out like, exactly what I want my composition to be. And, I'm working through, what is the story, what characters need to be there, what actions do they need to be taking, how am I going to guide the viewer's eye through the piece so that they see all those elements in the right order to get that story that I want to impart. And then I like to do a value thumbnail or like a value key. So this means taking my sketch and adding like grayscale values to it, aka like how dark or light I want every part of the piece to be. Thinking about it kind of in terms of like if it was going to be like an ink drawing or like a pencil drawing where you're just using like grayscale, right? And the reason that I like to do a full value comp for my piece is that it removes one entire element, which is, hue and saturation, color. It takes that out of the running. So all I need to think about is how dark or light different areas need to be so that I can get the piece to read the way that I want it to, especially because value contrast is kind of the number one way that I can control, where people look in the picture that I'm painting. And then once I've figured out my values, once I feel really solid in what my value comp is going to look like, then I will go in and do a full color comp, a full color key for the piece, typically. And then what I've got at the end of that is I've got my detailed sketch where, all my characters, everything in the environment is fully kind of locked in and drawn the way that I want it to look. And then I've got my values figured out, how I want my values to look, and I have my colors figured out, my full, like what I want the full color of the piece to look like. So then when I'm doing the final painting, what I'm really doing is focusing just on the paint application, my edges, my brush marks, the specific intricacies of, the way each character looks and each item looks, rather than the big picture. The big picture is already kind of solved. I've figured it out. I've hopefully by that point done enough legwork that I've solved the big puzzles for the piece. All the puzzle pieces are kind of in their place. And now as I'm doing the final painting, I can focus on just things like the rendering, how I want the paint to look, how I want the edges to look, how I want the textures to look. And I really like to break it out into those segments because it just makes the whole thing feel a lot more feasible so that at any stage in the process, I kind of have an idea of what I need to do next. I'm never feeling like, oh my God, I'm so lost. Like, what do I need to do? I always know what my next step is, and I always have some sort of roadmap that is guiding that next step at every stage in the process.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of like a blueprint that you just have to follow, and you kind of just know, okay, this, then this, and this. I am so curious because, again, on your art book, I love your personal work. I mean, it's cool working for like the entertainment industry, but there's nothing so special than, your original work that you poured all your love and care into. I love seeing all your beautiful, gorgeous scenes and the story. Everything's just like so captivating. And it has such a, like, it reminds me of my childhood, right? Like, it just has this very dreamlike kind of scenes, and I absolutely love it. I would like you to talk a bit more about the book and what maybe was your favorite part working on the book, your favorite chapter, why you decided to come up with the name Windows to the World. It's just tell us a bit more.
Of course. Well, first of all, thank you. That makes me very happy to hear. I feel like often as artists, we're like really drawn to other artists' personal work. Like I definitely feel that too. Like, cause there's just something really special about like seeing that from another artist. It like tells you something about them. And that's kind of like what the idea of the book was. Like the whole like idea of Windows to Worlds was like the art that I make is a window into like the world inside my head. And I think that that's so cool that like, without needing to use any spoken language. So like something that's uniting, like for like all across the world that can be like understood regardless of things like language barrier, like art allows you to like look directly into the mind of the artist. And like that, I just think that's so cool. Like that is so like enchanting. And I think also that like windows themselves are like a really cool motif. I use like window motifs a lot. Like I have a lot of work where there'll be like someone inside and something really fantastical like happening outside through a window. Like I have a whole series of like these two little boys running through this like mansion, and out the windows there's like they're underwater, there's like whales and like manta rays and stuff like that. And part of this is like such an oddball story, but part of why I find that so enchanting is that when I was a kid, I had a sliding glass door, and there were a few times that I actually woke up in the night and saw like really weird stuff happening outside because I lived in the mountains. So lots of animals would come through. Like I would, get up in the early hours of the morning and there would be deer, you know what I mean, like outside my window. Or like one of the like wilder ones was one time I woke up in the middle of the night and there was a raccoon war going on right outside my sliding glass door. Like I woke up to the sound of animals like tearing each other apart. I was like 11 years old, and I like crawled down, got up to the because I had like a loft bed, so I went down my ladder and walked over to this door, gazing out at the mountains. You're like middle of nowhere, and there were just like raccoons like trying to kill each other right outside, and I like thought that I was dreaming. It was so bizarre. But like moments like that have really stuck with me. Like I think that there's just something like really like magical about seeing something through a window, and like I like to take my imagination like even further. Like how far can I push like what someone is seeing like outside of a window? And then I guess like the last component to my book is this idea of like there's this wonder that we feel when we're little kids, when everything is so new that we don't really have a great sense yet of what could be real and what couldn't, because there's so many things that are real that are like nuts, you know what I mean? Like dinosaurs. Like, what do you mean that there were like these dinosaurs that like walked the earth and they were like, like giant reptilians or whatever? And and so there's just this like wonder that we walk around with when we're little, because everything is so big and so new. And I feel like we can still experience that through our whole lives, but like through art. And like that's something that I think is so cool, like going into a movie theater and watching something like fantastical play out on screen. Like I think one of the experiences that I had recently with that was like seeing Everything Everywhere All at Once in theaters. Like
movie. Yeah,
that movie is like
so
nothing
amazing.
else. It's so
Yes.
cool. It's just like you're seeing stuff that like you would never dream up on your own. You know what I mean? That's just like so otherworldly and incredible, and like experiences like that like bring me right back to like being a little kid, and that's something that I try to kind of bring with my own art too.
I see all the motifs carried out, and I think you do convey that feeling. Like I said, looking at your artwork it always reminds me of being a child, and like just like waking up and everything feels so wonderful and everything feels so magical. Like even the little moments, it just feels, different, and your art definitely embodies that. Speaking of like being a child, when we were all younger, creating art was so, natural. It was so fun. But as we grow older and maybe want to take art professionally, we kind of lose track and lose sense of that feeling of like joy we get from creating. And sometimes this might lead to art block, and some people might give up. Have you ever experienced this? And if you have, how have you dealt with like dealing with art block and overcoming that feeling?
So I found that in my life, typically my like art block, like if I have like an art block response, it is usually because like I am overwhelmed or exhausted. Like I don't know if this is like universal for everybody, but I think like the demands of like living in this world of like being an artist under capitalism are immense. And I think that burnout and exhaustion, like it is this monster that is always lurking in the background for like honestly, I would say the majority of working artists. I feel like most of the people that I know, like this is something that we have to kind of constantly monitor, because it can be really exhausting to balance like being creatively fulfilled with the fact that like once it becomes your job, you have obligations that you need to meet. And sometimes you end up creatively drained at the end of the day from meeting those obligations, and you're not able to do those things that are like the most creatively fulfilling. I think that that's like a big culprit for me and a lot of other people. And I guess like the things that I do, it's not all of these are going to be accessible to everybody, unfortunately, and that's something that I think really sucks. But like I always try to build in time to work on projects that are deeply creatively fulfilling for me, like personal work that is deeply creatively fulfilling. That really keeps like the art block and those feelings of exhaustion at bay. But like there's an immense amount of privilege that goes into being able to do that, like being able to make enough money in other ways to like leave time for myself to do that, and then also to have those things like lead also into, you know, a way that I sustain myself also. Like that's not accessible to everybody, but I feel really grateful that that is, because having that time to like do those things that like keep me feeling enriched, like really keeps that at bay. Like it allows me to focus on those things that like keep me really inspired, you know, and want and in the mood to create. And then beyond that, like being able to like take care of myself, you know, physically, mentally, that has been huge. I think that, you know, a lot of the times that I was running into art block when I was younger, I was really just like my basic needs weren't being met. And that is so easy for that to happen, you know, like my living conditions weren't great and I didn't have enough time in the day to be getting like the exercise and like the social interaction and, you know, cooking good food and things like that. And getting to a more solid place where like I've been able to prioritize those things have also really helped with that. And then I think, you know, something that has really helped with it that I think is, you know, available to most people, or at least hopefully is just being able to, as much as possible, separate our self-worth as individuals from our output as artists. Because I think that something that can happen often is, you know, we become so we tie like who we are as people, as an individual, and like the value that we give ourselves to the art that we're making. And then if we end up not being happy with our output for a variety of reasons, you know, maybe our lives are getting messy and it's getting harder to like, you know, put the time into that personal work that makes us feel good, then our sense of self and like who we are, you know, and our belief in ourselves, that can like crumble. And I think that is being able to kind of like slowly overcome those feelings and like fight back against them and remind myself that like I have value no matter what, you know, and like I you know, we all have value no matter what, and that value is not tied to like our output or like to the things that we make or we do. That has really, really helped me. And I it's hard, it's difficult to get there. Like it's not easy, and I still fight with that all the time. But it's something that I like try to really put an active effort into separating those things and making sure that I am not tying them together too closely.
We're all trying to find the solution, right? Everyone has their different ways of dealing with these emotions. So yeah, thank you. That was definitely very, very helpful. Okay, we're coming to the end of the interview. I would like to just ask, what advice would you give to beginner artists or artists that, you know, are early on into their journey, as well as artists who want to become freelance artists, work in the entertainment industry, want to make their own art books, want to get published? What general advice would you have for beginner artists in their journey?
Man, okay, few things. First of all, this industry on the whole is really a team sport, and the sport that we're playing is helping each other all survive in an industry that is like not friendly to us ultimately. Like this industry, like the corporations who are, you know, especially, you know, in bigger industries like games and animation and stuff, like really like we are each other's teammates in this. So as early as you can, rather than seeing the people around you as competition, seeing them as like potential allies and peers who like we can rely on each other and help each other survive in this world. I think that that's like really vital. And not everybody is going to be aware of this, you know? So, for beginners who are like entering like workplaces for the first time, there are some people who are going to, not maybe understand that it's better to be, peers and allies to each other than it is to be in competition with each other. But the more that we can support each other and, become a unified front, like fight for better treatment for artists, like across the board, like the stronger we are, essentially. So I think that's really great for beginners to think about as early as possible. And then, as much as you can, just nurturing your love for your craft, because that is something that carries you. And, that is easier said than done for like a variety of reasons. But as much as you can, like making sure that you take time to like do artwork that makes you happy, like that is really like, I think that's as vital as the time you spend studying. Like studying is great, and like become improvement and like becoming better is great, but also taking time to like do things that like where the process itself is like happy for you, is like a happy place. I think that that is really, really wonderful, and that being able to enjoy that like carries you through a lot of heartache and turmoil.
We're coming to the end of the interview. Do you have any last words, anything to say, maybe shout outs, whatever? The table's yours.
Yeah, I guess I just want to shout out like the other artists who were in the composition book. Like they did such incredible work. It is such a like a I'm so honored to have been a part of it. I just think they're amazing, and I feel so lucky to have my work alongside like such incredible artists. They're so great.
Thank you so much, Devin. As I mentioned before, if you want to know more about Devin and her art, her process, you can check out her art book. And if you want to know more about composition, you can also check out the Artist Master Series on composition and narrative over at 3D Total's website. So thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much, Devin, for being here with us. And yeah.